Okay, today we are working on CO5, square roots. It is in the textbook, chapter 11, first lesson of chapter 11, pages 577 to 579. Again, you don't have to have that book with you in class, but if you want to look at it at home to help you understand a little better, you can. So we always have our textbook pages that go along with our daily lessons. Today we are learning about square roots. So this is important to know. Your square root of a number n is the number m. Ooh, this is going to sound complicated, but I'm going to show you how it's not. So the square root of a number n is number m, which when multiplied by itself equals n. It sounds confusing, okay? But watch. Yesterday, we talked about those exponents a lot. Remember 5 squared? So remember that was 5 times 5. What does that equal, Gregory? 25. So when we say this is 5 squared, now we're going to find the square root of 25. So it's building off of the lesson we just did. So finding the square root of something is saying what number times itself would equal the number that we want. So m would be what number? If our n is 25, what would m be? If n equals 25, m is that number which multiplied by itself equals n. 5. So the square root of 25 is 5. So in the assignment we did yesterday, that we corrected yesterday, they gave us that number and said, what number with its power would equal that? So remember that was 5 squared would equal 25. So we're just going in reverse. The square root of 25 is 5. So we're working it backwards now. So with the exponents, we're saying the number multiplied by itself, we're just doing it 2 times. So when you square something, you've got that 2 up here. When you find the square root, what number multiplied by itself just that 1 time, so there's 2 numbers, would equal that? Nancy?
What if it's just like 7?
So if our number is 7 squared, it would equal what? 49. So we can say the square root of 49 equals 7. But what if we say, well, what's the square root of 7? Is that an easy number?
No.
So we say it's not a perfect square. So it's not going to be a whole number. So we are only going to work with perfect squares right now. So a number where when you find its square root, it's going to be a whole number. So we're just going to work with those perfect squares because it's going to be easier for us. Wait a second and we're going to get to it. Okay. Okay, so numbers that are squares of integers, such as 1 equals 1 squared, 4 equals 2 squared, are called perfect squares or square numbers. So those perfect squares are a good thing to know. All right, is that Gabby? Say it louder. We're going to do the square roots of the perfect squares. So the answer will be whole numbers. Okay, so we're going to be working with just those whole number perfect squares. So it'll be that whole number times itself would equal what we're trying to find the square root of. Okay, so a radical expression is an expression involving a radical sign. So we learned last year about PEMDAS right? You guys remember Mr. Robinson teaching you about PEMDAS with the order of operations, parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. And then people said, well, Mrs. Gambino, why does it now have an R in it? For PEMDAS. This is why. So we have parentheses is the first thing you do in order of operations. Then we have exponents and radicals. There's that R. Then we have multiply, divide. Then we have add, subtract. So that R is for the radical, which means square root. So this little square root sign is called a radical. All right, so let's look at our examples. Maybe. And let me get my pen back real quick, because technology is not my friend today. Oh, technology is wonderful. So any questions as I quick do this about the radicals? All right. It just disappeared again. Okay, so we're gonna look at it the best that we can. So example 1 was 9 squared equals 81, and negative 9 squared would equal 81. Because we know a negative times a negative, the answer is a positive. Therefore, the square roots of 81 are both 9 and negative 9. Because either one, you would get 81 as the answer when you square them. So that goes to your question about what if it's a negative number?
No, that was me.
So that square root, wasn't it you that asked that?
No, it was Will.
Oh, it was Will. Sorry. So that goes to your answer about what if it's a negative number. Okay? So 7 squared equals 49, and negative 7 squared equals 49. Therefore, the square roots of 49 are both the positive and the negative 7. So if we look at example 2, we have 36, square root of 36 is 6, because 6 squared, 6 times 6 is 36. So if it's a negative 36 square root, your answer is going to be negative 6. So if it's a positive square root of 36, it's a positive 6 for your answer. If it's a negative square root of 36, your answer would be a negative 6. So if we look at 16, it's a positive square root of 16 is the positive 4. And the negative square root of 16 would be a negative 4. So you're looking at what you're doing after the negative sign. So you have negative, and then you have that square root of 16. So you find the square root of 16 is 4, and then you have that negative in front of it. So you look at doing what comes after the negative sign, and you keep the negative sign there. Did that answer your question, Will? Okay. So 0 is special. 0 squared is 0, so the square root of 0 is 0. Example 3, the equation s equals 8 square root of h expresses the minimum speed s in feet per second needed by the pole vaulter to clear a height of h feet. So we don't know how high he's going to jump. We don't know that height. How fast should the pole vaulter run to vault over a height of 16 feet? So I'm going to give you a moment to try to figure that out. See if you can figure out what his speed should be. What should the S be if the H is 16? So write out your equation. S equals 8 square root of the H. Square root of 16. I'm going to give us just a moment to work it out. I know some of us already know it. Let's give just a moment. what do you think the answer is be? What should the speed be? How fast should the pole vaulter be going? Does anybody have it figured out? So remember, you want to put in your expression. So if we have S equals 8 times the square root of H. So I don't have that square root symbol there. What is the square root of 16? What times itself would equal 16? Tristan? Times, not add. So we want to multiply. What multiplied by itself equals 16? Tristan, you want to try again?
Yeah, 4.
4. So if we do 8, it would be 8 times 4, because that 8 is outside of that square root. So that means we're going to multiply the square root of 16. 4 times 4 equals 16. So the square root of 16 is 4. Now can we figure out what the speed should be? What should S be? S equals what? Anthony? 32. Because we found our square root, which was 4, and then we have to multiply it by the 8. So our speed should be 8 times 4. So the speed should be 32. And it would be, our label would be feet per second. So he's running 32 feet per second. Now we have some examples. So you should have written down on your paper so you remember how to do this equation. You're going to see stuff like this in today's work. So you should know that S equals 32 feet per second. So that would look like feet per second would be our label. Look at example 4. Evaluate the expression when Z equals 7 and M equals -2. So if we look, the square root of 29 plus Z, if we fill in that 7 for Z, it's the square root of 29 plus 7. Oh, I could not get that square root symbol to be long. So that square root symbol goes over it all. So think of that square root symbol to go over that entire thing. So you need to find 29 plus 7 and then find the square root of it. So what is 29 plus 7? Will? 36. So then you need to find the square root of 36. So if 29 plus 7 is 36 and we need to find the square root of it, what would the square root of 36 equal, Gabby? 6, because 6 times 6 equals 36. So look at B. They filled in the -2 and, oh, sorry, over here, we had Z squared, which is 7. 7 squared is 49. -2 squared would be a +4 plus 11. So you add all of those up and find the square root of it. So what is 49 plus 4 plus 11? Maya? You're one step ahead of me. What was 49 plus 4 plus 11, Maya?
64.
64. So we have now square root of 64 which would be what, Maya? 8, because we know 8 times 8 equals 64. So you see how you have to do all the adding together, then find the square root? Okay, so if it was 64, 8 times 8, you have to know those multiplication facts. That's why it's important. We talked about it with the exponents. It's still just as important to be practicing those multiplication facts. Anthony?
So it's kind of similar, like, to division, I think.
Yes, you're using division with it. So you're using exponents, your knowledge of your exponents when you square something. You're doing the reverse. So when you square something, you're multiplying. When you're doing radicals, you're dividing. So the square root is the radical. All right, I am going to stop our recording.